oh, there'll be a bunch of people, but it looks like several didn't show up. Although my wife's going to show up, it looks like. There she is.
Yes.
Oh, there's another one. Sonia. So, okay, everyone, welcome. I am George Gnosis, and I'm joined here with Wes Andrew, our assistant winemaker. Wes.
Hi.
And so we're just going to go through these wines really fast. And you guys let me know. We'll sort of just go through them. You guys can, if you have questions, if you don't want to talk on the Zoom, you can always just text or put it on the
chat
in the chat there, and we'll get to them as we go through things. You're welcome to pipe up if you have a question in between here as we talk about things, specifically about any of the processes or the wines themselves, flavors, or like I said, other vintages. We'll let's wait for the other vintages or other wines till after we get through these guys, so we can at least get through these, and then we'll have plenty of time, I think, to go over any other questions you have. So we got two different vintages here, 19 and 20. So, two different growing seasons, actually two very different growing seasons. I wish this would be a good one for a vertical for us, if we did a vertical from 19 and 20 Rieslings or Cab Franc, that might be interesting too, because they are very different. We have a very sort of cool year and a very warm, dry year. So not between the two, they are very different. They didn't seem really close in any way, other than the harvests were relatively clean, both of them, even the 19. We're going to go through the three wines, which are the dry Riesling 2020, the Stonebridge White 2019, and the Cab Franc 2019. And just a quick note about the vintages. 2019 was technically a cooler year. The winter was cold, but it wasn't so much that we had these negative temperatures. So there wasn't really much of an issue with damage to the vines, or it was really cool early in the season. And so it did delay some of the bud break and bloom. And the summer, there was a good amount of sunshine and sort of moderate rain, but it really wasn't really warm enough in July and August to really push along the ripening. And this is another one that's, we talk about September being the sort of make or break. This was the 19 was September was sort of that made the year. It dried up. It warmed up a little bit. There was some humidity, and the grapes were able to hang a lot longer than we thought they would be able to, and it did raise the sugars. And we were sort of worried because the acidities were very high, mostly because the ripening was delayed, and usually the acidity starts dropping as the grapes ripen. It sort of goes, the sugars go up, acidity starts going down. So September helped out with that a lot. So we had a great September, and that sort of rounded off the 2019 vintage, and really made it for us. It was a great, the reds were a little bit higher in acidity. We just had one, the Pinot Noir, which will be coming out not too long, the 19. But it did, they did drop out, and the wines turned out excellent. I think the 19 wines are going to be really great. These couple here, of course, you've already had, but there's still a couple of the reds, couple of the reds that are still waiting to come out as we move through these other wines. And then 2020, so now 2020, we're going to get to the Riesling first. And if you don't already have something poured, you should pour something. Enjoy it while we're waiting. But the 2020 vintage, if you remember 2020, I'm sure we'll always forever remember 2020. For all kinds of reasons. We'll remember 2020 in the winery because it was probably one of the best vintages in recent memory I think even topping the 2016 vintage. We had a really mild winter again, no damage. There was a little delayed bud break, but then May and June were very dry. If the spring was super dry, and if you remember it, but the grass, everything out here looked like the Serengeti. It was just brown. Everything was dry. I think what they said, May and June were 60% below average in rainfall. July was a little bit warmer than average, and we did get a little bit more rain. There was like 20% above average in July, but then really the whole season we're only got like half of the annual rainfall on average. So by harvest, we were in really good shape, and Wes was just talking about this at lunch. It was one of the most beautiful harvests we had ever seen. I mean, I've been here since 13. Vinny's been here 20 years. I think even for him, we never seen Pinot Noir that looked as beautiful as it did in 2020. And everything, I wouldn't even say there was little disease pressure. There was no disease pressure. Everything was completely beautiful. So while all this other worldly stuff is raging on, 2020 in the vineyard, if you just walk down the vineyard and forgot everything else that's happening in the world, you were in heaven, at least as a grower or a winemaker, because of how beautiful everything looked. We were just taking pictures, I think, constantly of just clusters of grapes. So I think from 2020, there's probably a ream of pictures of grapes because we were just enamored with how beautiful they all were. So 2020 was a pretty great vintage. And, you don't necessarily think of a warm year being a great Riesling year. And that's all, sort of the thing, these really warm years, they're going to be a great red year. It's going to be, a pretty good year for whites, but not as good as, like, say, 19 was a cooler year. Warm days, cool nights for Rieslings are usually what we like. And that's why those, it's people that came out here looking to plant Riesling saw that as one of the great things about the region. But 2020 was definitely a much warmer year. So by at least my surprise, I was amazed at how great the Rieslings were. I think, going into this dry Riesling was probably one of my favorite dry Rieslings in I think my career here. I'd like to, we do some of the other ones, but it was just a great vintage. This one we unfortunately didn't have a lot of. We only had 185 cases. So of course it went really fast with all the club members especially. And this one was relatively, as far as our winemaking styles and techniques, this was a pretty straightforward Riesling. It was destemmed and pressed right away after we harvested. It was approximately 4 weeks in stainless steel tanks fermenting. And then it aged in stainless for 5 months. There was some lees contact, so it was left on some of the yeast, the expired yeast that helps bring a little bit of body and texture to the wine. But that was it. There was no barrels. There was no other sort of, like I said, it was fairly straightforward. There was no other interesting winemaking techniques or anything there. It was just a great straightforward fermentation. And it really is very crisp, very fruity. That's another, what I loved about this one. And mostly from two of our vineyards. This is not a vineyard specific Riesling, and so it's not called out on the bottle. It's just a dry Riesling because it is a blend of a couple of the blocks. This is our North Block 7 and our East-West 5. So the East-West ones, if you've of course been to the vineyard, there's some rows that are going east-west, while all of the other ones in the vineyard are going north-south. So I'm just going to bring up a little share. some screen shots here. Why we were going. Yay. So we got a little slide. So can you see that, Wes?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So there's a little slideshow, a little picture of the vineyards there. And Riesling, of course, everybody knows a little bit about Riesling, but those are the, I like put this up every time we're doing one of these just to give everybody an introduction if they haven't been here before. A lot of you guys have, so you guys have seen this before, but just the common flavors, aromas. Atwater's had Riesling since 1988. We still have some of those early vines. Well, we're actually on the 90s.
No, I think East West One is
East West One
88.
is it still 88?
Yeah,
One of the,
East
I think
West
that's
One is
the
88.
last of those old blocks.
I believe it is.
And 9.25 acres. That's the most we have planted of anything. Is Riesling. Of course, as you know, we've sort of started planting more and more reds, but Riesling is still our number one in our heart and is the most planted in the vineyard. And there we are with the sort of just a couple things about the Riesling, which we already sort of talked about. Very straightforward. Then we got some nice cheese plate there with all that Riesling. I think my wife, Amy, there has taken lots of pictures with lots of bottles, which just means we have to pour out a glass of it, which means we have to drink it.
Or drink it.
Hey, George, can you do me
Yeah.
a favor and explain the botrytis for my daughter? Because you'll do a much better job of it than, because I just learned about it the last one of these.
I think Wes was just talking about this with the staff our new interns this morning. So Wes, why don't you tell a little bit about that?
I was indeed explaining botrytis this morning. So botrytis is it's a rot essentially. I know that doesn't sound appealing, but it's a rot induced by a fungus called botrytis. And it happens in cooler regions due to rain mostly. But you might think rot is a bad thing. And in some cases, too much botrytis is. But a little bit of botrytis, if it's the good kind of botrytis, eventually that rot will turn into a bad kind of rot called sour rot. But a little bit of good botrytis can actually add a lot of kind of tropical flavors to wine. You can eat it right off of a cluster. I did it today with one of the interns who was a little put back by putting moldy grapes in their mouth. But it's a tool that we use to kind of give some, mostly Rieslings, kind of a more of a tropical, almost candied flavor. So I mean, it's not going to be sweet. Well, it is sweet in a way. It's that candiness also can affect the bricks, the sugar level in the wine, because it's concentrated in a way. So it also adds that factor. It can raise the bricks as well. But essentially, botrytis is a rot. They call it noble rot in Germany because it's a good kind of rot. There are some wines in the world. We did in 19. I don't think it's released yet.
No.
That is essentially 100% botrytis. So yes, I guess hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's sort of
All right,
dehydrated.
I got a thumbs up. Good.
It's a fungus.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of dehydrates the grapes.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, in some kind, it could be sort of honey-like. Yeah, I'm interested to see everybody's what everyone thinks of that'll be the new Celsius. We're still calling it Celsius, but it's really a botricized Riesling,
Yes.
which was fun to sort through. But it is very delicious because it has, now you have 100% of this sort of very concentrated, very sweet, and sort of honeyed juice from these botricized grapes. And if you take 100% of that, it's definitely going to make a very rich
Yes.
a late harvest almost wine. So that's something to look forward to. I'm deciding when to release that. I know we have a bunch of wines coming up, but that might be something we release in the winter. Something sweet.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, something around there, and bring that out again. And that's relatively a small 100 cases, so that'll be fun to try. Just another thing you can do with Riesling and Noble Rot, the noblest. Yeah, so we did a couple Rieslings in 2020. We just did basically just this dry Riesling, a semi-dry, which is currently in the tasting room now. And we made a lot more of that, and then the bubble Riesling, which was actually the same, almost the same blend, but carbonated. And we of course run out of that too. You guys all did a very good job drinking all of that. So we're excited to get some new stuff here in the spring, and hopefully the harvest goes well, and we'll have lots of new things to give you. Any particular questions on the Riesling while we're on it here?
George, does it go after the 5 months in stainless? Does it go straight to bottle, or what happens after the 5 months in stainless?
Yeah, that's basically, there might be some weeks there that we're doing blending, or we're doing trials before we finalize the wine. But it's going to go right into bottle at that point. The aging would be whenever we put aging, that's pretty much close to bottling. If we just, that's why I sort of been, when we do these tech notes, it's sort of separating out the fermentation time from the aging, because fermentation is not always, it doesn't always end, like, oh, fermentation ended today. It can go for a while, very slowly. It can go very fast. And so we've sort of been trying to separate out exactly how long the fermentation was on these sort of tanks. These tank wines that we're not necessarily going to rack, like a red wine, fermentation might be close to over, and then you press it off, and then you put in barrels, and it basically starts aging. Here, you're sort of going, we're not really racking it off the lees, so it's just going to basically, fermentation finishes, and it just ages with the lees on. So we're not really moving the wine any. It's sort of staying in the same place, but we're sort of trying to differentiate when fermentation was ended and then aging begins. Sometimes that's racking it off and clarifying the wine slightly, and then sulfuring it. Other times it's just allowing it to sit and continue slowly on the lees before we even do any kind of sulfuring or anything like that. So, but yes, it would have been pretty quickly because we bottled it right there in April. So. And anything, I mean, the alcohol once again, the alcohol was a little bit higher on this one. Usually we're in the 12 range for Riesling. This one's 13, which was a pretty high alcohol for most of our Rieslings. But it doesn't, I think it balances pretty well. I guess the idea, if you have it's sort of like with, a sweet wine is having enough acidity to balance out the sugar. It seems like the alcohol is pretty well balanced in this wine. It doesn't come off as, overly alcoholic.
Hey, George, stupid question. It says fermented in stainless and then aged in stainless. Is it the same tanks for 9 months?
Yeah, I think for most of the time for this one, yeah. Unless there's a couple, if we didn't want it to age on the dead yeast, then we would separate it and put it in a new tank. But for a lot of these Rieslings, we like a little of that aging on the dead yeast or the lees. And so it probably would have stayed, it stayed right on that tank. Occasionally what we'll do.
Something to it to get it to stop fermenting so that it would just.
Well, for this one, we wanted to keep fermenting.
So basically it fermented for 9 months, or no, actually 6 months, 4 weeks that was.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, it fermented for approximately 4 weeks. And how we could tell that is we check the sugar levels. So at some point,
Yeah, eventually
it
the
was-
sugars are, right.
they're
yeah.
gone, they're depleted. And so I'm sure there might be a tiny percentage of sugar that might percolate through a little bit more. So we're just giving it a sort of stop date when we measured it where it was pretty much dry.
Okay.
It would be different if we had a Riesling. Because if we had a semi-dry Riesling, we would be
Then you gotta
stopping.
stop it because you want to leave some of the sugars there.
That's correct. Yes. So
Yeah.
with a dry, we don't have to do that. In fact, we're hoping we're trying to keep it that it keeps fermenting. Sometimes occasionally what you get is called a stuck ferment, where all of a sudden the fermentation just slows to a stop where you don't want it. Especially if you're trying to get a dry wine. We haven't had that issue with Riesling, but that can be a problem in things like rosés. Occasionally, where you'll have to sort of coax it, stirring it, aerating it a bit, getting the yeast to finish, finish off get to the finish line. That can be an issue with it. Depends. It can be a vintage thing. It can be certain varietals. Things like rosé can be a tough one sometimes. But yeah, you can get a problem where it doesn't complete fermentation and you have to intervene to coax it to go forward. Sometimes even going as far as to adding a fresh culture of yeast that might be stronger and can finish the fermentation. But thankfully, that's not something that happens all the time. It's just, like I said, something that that's why we keep monitoring these things every day. Myself, when I was doing it, now Wes doing it as the staff is going through and checking all those things during fermentation, especially right off the bat, make sure things have started, make sure they're moving, and make sure the things are happening that we need to happen. Or if you wait too long, then you sort of miss some milestones. It becomes even more difficult. So yeah, we are constantly monitoring all this stuff during harvest and fermentation, and even into certain things, like I said, with the Rieslings. Sometimes it's even hard to stop a fermentation for a Riesling. We want to stop it at a certain point. Yeast don't just stop. Even if you add sulfur, even if you've racked them off and chilled them down, there's some tough guys in there that will continue fermenting. And you sort of have to take that into account. When you stop it, you might want to, it doesn't always stop exactly where you want. So one way or the other, sometimes they can be too slow. Other times they can be too quick. So, no, that's a good question.
And George, when you said blending, so you took the aged tanks and then you blend. So is that blending between the tanks, or is that blending with something else? This is 100% dry Riesling, right?
Correct. Yeah, this would be, if we added anything else, I think we had a Riesling a couple of years ago that we added a small amount of vignoles to. That's usually called out in the tech notes. So that would be, any blending would be between those two tanks, whether it's North 7, East, West. It would be all Riesling. That's the good thing. We usually try, if we can, is just separate out the Riesling blocks, because that gives us a tool to sometimes to differentiate, flavors. There might be a more tropical one. There might be one that we want more for a Riesling, a semi-dry as opposed to a dry. And so it just gives us a little bit more tools to make a better wine one way or the other. Sometimes blending a little bit more sometimes blending a little dry into the Riesling might help dry it up a little bit, or to adjust the sugars. The same way the other way, we might do it the other way too, where adding a little bit of the semi-dry will bring a little bit more fruit to the dry Riesling by just modifying it slightly while keeping it in the dry range. So it's better to have it separated out for the most part than to just have everything already blended, because then you have a little bit more options to blend into, like I said, to sort of make that best of wines.
So how many tanks of Riesling out of those 9 acres? 4?
It really depends. It really depends on the vintage, but yeah, there's several. There's East West. There's East West 1. There's East West 5. There's East West
2 as well.
2, yeah, and then we got
S7,
South 7,
S11,
S11,
N7, C1.
Is that most of them?
There's a lot. Yeah, I think that's all of them. I think there's 6 or 7 blocks.
North 7, yeah. So yeah, we don't always have all 7 like that, but we might blend a couple of smaller ones together right off the bat, knowing that those usually work well together already. It really depends on the vintage, that when we're doing that and how much wine we're making that vintage. So we have in 14, we basically made 5 different dry Rieslings, I think, and a Riesling. So we actually had a middle block Riesling, we had an East-West Riesling. We had a Navone Riesling, which was from our friends, Josh and Lisa Navone, that we planted a vineyard for just down the street. We had just tanks and tanks of Riesling in 14. So some years like that, we did have many tanks of Riesling. This year, this one, we just had a couple in 2020. All right. Anybody got any good flavor or smells on this Riesling that you want to call out? Wes, you have any to start us off?
I'm no longer drinking the Riesling, but my memory, it has a, I don't know, it smell. If we're talking about smells, it has a very kind of like, I mean, chamomile might not be the exact flower, but some sort of white flower, chamomile. I'm going to go with chamomile and say chamomile. On the nose, citrus, and then on the palate, it's more of a, not like a green, not like a green apple, but some sort of red apple, citrus, lemon mostly. It does end with this almost like kick of ginger as well.
Ginger.
Some spicy root. Radish. I don't know. Maybe not radish. Ginger.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick with ginger.
What is it? Yeah, radish came up one other time, one vintage.
Wasabi. I don't know. Some sort of root.
Spicy root.
Yeah.
right.
Galangal. I don't know.
Anybody else have some exotic things they're picking up?
I don't know about exotic, but I have to say that dry Riesling from 2009 or for 2020 is really good.
Thank you.
Good.
Really
Well,
nice texture, bite, all of that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not getting any radish here at all.
All right. Radish was a poor descriptor. I'm gonna stick with ginger.
Ginger sounds good.
I feel like there is a little ginger at the end.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, we can come back to any questions you have on the dry Riesling too. As you sit with it for a little while later, I'm going to put this away and move on to the next one. Stonebridge Whites. Very apt. This is the vintage race weekend in Watkins Glen. And that's exciting. I'm not a big car race guy or anything, but it's that seeing all those old cars down the entire Main Street there is really fun. Me and Amy like to go to it just because it's cool to see all those people that are really proud of their old cars and hanging out and showing them off, and then hearing them all rumble down the street of Watkins is actually pretty fun. So if you guys haven't gone to that, it's great. And so our label here, as most know, is this sort of homage to the old race history of Watkins Glen. And if you see the picture there on the computer, Amy went to the old stone bridge that this is, the painting of, which is on the original old racetrack through the hills there of Watkins, stone bridge. So the Stonebridge White on the stone bridge there. So this is our table white wine. There's been many different iterations. The blend does change quite a bit and will change again this year. This one's a slightly different than we've had before. This for the most part, was basically made to be our most accessible white. There's usually a slight residual sugar to it, and we usually use hybrids or hybrid white grapes. This one, it's been in the past Cayuga, Vidal, sometimes some Vignoles. Those have been the main ones we've used in this, at least going back as far as I've been here. It's this season, this 19 was primarily Cayuga white from our vineyards. This will be the last vintage of Cayuga white. We actually pulled it out last year to plant some other stuff. Yes, our poor friends, the old Cayuga white. Yes, so we're going to have a different blend because we'll no longer have Cayuga white. But this is actually a really easy drinking wine. That 10% Vignoles that's in it adds that nice tropical nose. Vignoles is so good about that. It has nice acidity and just lots of tropical fruit, papayas and all that good stuff. So 1.6% residual sugar, coming off of the 2019 harvest, the cooler harvest. The pH is usually not too far off of Riesling. It's pretty similar on this wine, and just standard fermentation in stainless steel. And this was 7 months in the tanks too. So this would have been, this is not usually one we age on lees. There might have been a little bit of it. For the most part, it would have been fermented in stainless, then racked off and aged in the tanks that they've been moved to, and then blended after that. Usually we have separate tanks of the Cayuga and the Vignoles, and then we would do trials and blend it in to make the final wine that you have in front of you. A little bit more case production. This one was close to 300 cases, and bottled a little bit later in May. And it was just released in July of this year. We moved on from our 18. And the acidity is a little bit high on this one, 9%, 9.9 grams per liter. Yeah, and this is a little lower in alcohol, 11.3. But just a nice, accessible white wine. And because they're two different grapes, they're going to be harvested at many, much different dates. That's why you can't like co-ferment these. At least the type of wine here, you can co-ferment grapes if they are harvested close to the same time, or you just or do a field blend where you actually just take both of them and blend them together and press them and ferment them together. For these, is late, sort of mid-September, late September, and then second week into October for the Vignoles. So they were fermented separately and then blended prior to bottling. And I got some good notes. I think this was Mateo and the gang in the tasting room. We like taking these wines down to the tasting room and have our tasting room staff and all of us sort of give descriptors. I like this: notes of kiwi, Meyer lemon, and banana.
So George, not about the wine per se, but about the label. I know you guys are kind of rebranding your labels. Will you, if you rebrand the Stonebridge, both the red and the white, will you keep some homage to the kind of picture that's there now?
I don't know. We haven't really gotten serious discussion about this. I think whether we use the same picture and reformat it, or if we.
The label's been on the Stonebridges for years.
I know. I know. I know, and there is such tradition behind some of these things, and it is hard to change things. Either that or a reinterpretation of somebody basically getting a new artist to draw like a more modern scene or something like that. We'll see. You guys will be the first ones to see it, I'm sure.
You gotta have a race car in the bridges somehow, is all I'm saying.
Yes. Well, I guess if we keep the Stonebridge name, it's got to be, yeah. I like the idea of some of these things. It's, you know, sort of like the name of Atwater. You know, there was, well, when we were changing the ownership and stuff, they were, oh, you're gonna change the name, you're gonna change the name. I'm like, no, because Atwater has been such a strong name. It was also the place where I did most of my professional winemaking. And it has such a great history, and such great people have been involved in it all these years. Vinny's worked as a winemaker under Atwater for 20 years, and you know, I'm not vain enough to want to have it under my name or somebody else's name. So I think there is something to be said for, you know, the history of something like this, and I think of Atwater as its own entity, you know, its own sort of organism. So I like it having its original name. I like the name. I like the idea of it. So, you know, there's some of that with the Stonebridge line. You know, I do. Like I said, I'm not a big car guy like Ted, the previous owner, was, but I do appreciate the history of the region, and I love seeing the old cars too. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I would definitely like to, you know, keep that part of the history in some shape or form. So I hope that sort of answers the question a bit.
Well, do you think you'll be adding the vintage year onto the label ongoing?
Yes.
I had a lot of trouble trying to figure out which was the 19th
Yes.
for tonight, and I think I got it, but I literally cannot tell. There's nothing that indicates on them right now.
No.
Yeah, there was a couple old reasons they never did it. It was sort of like the table white, and so it was easier for wholesale and stuff that it was just non-vintage. I never liked it, and so this would be the last year, regardless of the label change, that we'll have a non-vintage label. It'll actually be vintage, because once again, I think all of our wines, I like the idea of sort of being able to differentiate between the vintages, just for things like this, for things like seeing the change in how things change in the vintage, even though this one's, and plus these are all different blends, so it's not exactly the same thing. And for as small as a winery as we are, being able to talk about all the different things in vintage and blends, even if it's just our sort of most accessible table wine, we should be able to do that. And going forward, 2021, or actually, we don't have anything for 2020, so it'll be 2021 will be vintage on the label somehow. So yes, I agree with you, and that is in the works. And I think even the bubble will be the same way too. So our Riesling bubble or bubble Riesling, I don't really like necessarily. I like having a vintage on it, like I said, for just comparison sakes, and for it's fun to see the vintages change in the tasting room, all those good things. So vintage will be more widely distributed through some of the other wines too. Although most of them, I think, have been online with that, other than I think the Stonebridges and the bubbles. Yeah, the sweeter wines are sort of been phased out, so those won't be. We don't have to worry about those. Any other questions about Stonebridge?
I just have a comment, George.
Yeah.
Just that, so we've had Stonebridge in the past, and we actually have a couple bottles of them in the wine cellar.
Yeah.
Back when, and my memory of the original ones that we have were much sweeter than what we're tasting.
Yeah.
So this is really good.
Yeah.
I
So
remember that too.
yeah, I think what you'll see with there's a reason for that, and I think you know, the simple thing is we've sort of changed, you know, our focus on the wines. I think you've noticed that we've gotten rid of the sweet Niagara and the sweet Catawba and the sweet Chancellor's on its last year too. Is focusing on what we do best, and that also goes into how we marketed this wine. This wine was sort of marketed towards a sweeter crowd that was going for those wines. And if we're no longer we're focusing on what we do best, and also we've sort of changed our style a bit on these wines because of that. If we're not marketing to a sweeter crowd, then the wine should also, even these table wines should reflect that too. And before, it was sort of there was a couple wines that we as a group would talk about and then change, we would design the blends towards a certain audience. And, we did all the dry wines towards that, but these were supposed to be towards the sweeter audience. So we sort of went in the winemaking field. This was the ones we had to sort of give up to that sweeter crowd. A couple years ago, we stopped doing that. Vinny and myself decided we're going to start changing that, especially when I started managing. With the idea was to sort of bring these around there. You always think of I think the idea is they were thought of sort of lesser wines to some degree, and they shouldn't be. I think I want all of our wines to be great wines, even the sort of table blends. And so when we were doing the blends for these, the Stonebridge Red too, we started taking these down, making them accessible for that sort of semi or sort of a off dry, but not going sweet with these. And I think they made much better wines. And actually, I do enjoy these wines much better now because we weren't trying to sort of go in a different direction, and keeping them within this, and keeping them within this side of things, I think just made them better, at least from our standpoint. So if you hadn't had these wines for a long time because you thought they were one thing, I think it's time to revisit them. And going forward, it'll be the same thing. I think we're trying to make a balanced wine, and even if you make a sort of off dry, there's still a balance to it. And if they just are cloyingly sweet and I don't know, they just, yeah, I think you'll see that these wines are going to consistently be more better made wines.
Well, then we will have to revisit them, because we literally haven't bought the Stonebridges in years.
A decade.
Yeah.
They used to be my book club wines when they were sweeter.
Yeah. No, I know.
Right, you give it to your friends that like sweet wines, but we didn't drink them.
That's right. Yeah. We just sort of, like I said, I think you'll notice a lot more of the changes in the tasting room are sort of just, focusing more on those stuff that all you guys are really looking for in those drier styles, the really well-crafted wines. I don't think we necessarily have to have every wine for every person. There's plenty of places. We had a couple people come to the tasting room today and go, "I just want sweet wines. What do you have?" I said, "I got this one wine." And they go, "Oh," but I said, "You know what? That's fine. I actually can tell you exactly where to go. Which direction are you going? Go to Hazlitt. Go to Bagley's. Go to Catherine Valley." So there's plenty of places for everybody around here. And so the idea is, I'd rather have those people go to those places and get the stuff that they want. And for you guys, I'd rather have the stuff that is more reflective of this special site we have, and also of our, well-crafted winemaking. Like I said, Benny's been doing this.
From the Roster Ranch?
I forgot about Roster Ranch.
We try
Yeah,
not to
they-
think about Roster Ranch.
Yeah, I get my list together. The guy showed me the map. He's like, point out some that were where I should go. I said, "Oh, they're here. There you go." And he took off. So yeah, you'll see a lot less of that stuff nowadays. Once again, sad for some, but I think for the majority of everybody, I hope it's a well-welcomed change.
So George, weird question kind of off this. You talked about the sweet Catawba and the other one that used to be for mulling wine. Are you
Chancellor.
figuring a replacement for the mulling wine?
Yeah, we're not sure yet. I think you can make them out of like the Stonebridges. I think the people that really like, it's sort of tough with that wine, those mulled wines. We do, so if you're really into it, we have the last of the Catawba. There's actually not many, maybe about 10 cases, 12 cases. And then the last of the Chancellor. We'll actually have Chancellor for probably
Chancellor.
We got it. We do have several cases. We have a bunch of that's gonna, go through the next year. But for the Catawba, we're almost out. We actually, if you want your your old school sweet mulled wine kits. We actually prepared them. There are actually a couple dozen down there now of those last of those vintages. So you can get the, if any of you guys want to stock up on mulled wine kits, they'll be down there for the last hurrah of the old school kits. We're not sure we're going to do it for next year's, whether we do something fun where it's just, the Stonebridge red and white. And then I think the thing is you'd have to add just more sugar, when you do your mulled wine kit.
Sadly, we don't add the sugar to the mulled wine that it calls for. Just like put it in and because those were the two that we always were used to from you guys.
Yes.
That's it. No additional sugar, and that came out pretty well.
Okay, I mean, yeah, and it might just work that you can take the Stonebridge white red and then add a little bit of sugar to sweeten it up, and then add the spice pack. We got enough spice packs. I think they ordered them, and I think we're gonna have them for the next century. So we got lots of spice packs. So yeah.
So if we want sweet stuff, we should call Amanda and put an order in. It sounds like.
Yes, that's right. If you, like I said, we'll have the sweet chancellor on for a little while. We also ripped out our chancellor, so but the Catawba is definitely the last of these 10 cases or so. We'll be basically just going to mulled wine kits for this season. So if as a club member, if you say I need a bottle of Catawba, Amanda can get you a bottle before they're all gone.
We'll ask nicely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in New Hampshire, and it's really cold sometimes. So sometimes on those really cold nights, it's nice to have a nice mulled wine.
Sure. We'll have something, or if anything, we'll have the recipe for you all guys. Here's some spice packs, and here's a bottle of this and that, and go for it. And we might bring it back for some weird club event that we do in the cool of the winter or something like that. We are trying to plan some next club events now that possibly some picking events too here in the fall. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, cool.
Well, let's get to the last wine here, at least on this list, and then we'll go over any more questions. Cab Franc.
Too late, we started already.
Oh, you did.
I'm amazed by what color it has compared to other years.
Yeah, 18. I mean, if you compare it to 18 was we talked about 18 before. It was definitely a wet year. We didn't get a lot of color extraction in 18. So compared to 18, 19 was just beautiful. And I really liked the 19 reds. Like I said, we just had the Syrah the other day, and then the Pinot 19 is with a club exclusive line. So pretty soon we'll have a couple 19s available beyond this one. This one's going very fast too. I think we're on the last pallet of this. So I guess the 2020 will be here sooner than later. But the 19 was a great, like I said, it was a pretty good vintage. The 16 or the fall really cleared things up that September, and everything was really, really great. Once again, maybe not as fantastic as 2020, but it was still a good vintage, much better than 18.
Yes,
it was this nice in-between year. And it has all those nice sort of characteristics of Finger Lakes, and especially Atwater Cab Franc. As you see there, this is 1998 was the first time we had it introduced. I think there's some newer blocks down there. We basically have 2 large blocks of it, totaling 3 3/4 acres. It's right in the middle, right in the middle. You can see all of it really clearly from the tasting room windows. They're just right below the Pinot Noir, right in the center on that field, just below the tasting room is where all the Cab Franc is. And fermentation, we've been doing this for some years now, I think since 17. So this has been our sort of primary wild fermentation red. And so these go into a big stainless steel tank. It's called our pump over tank or red fermenter. We actually put them on their skins in there, and we basically pump the juice turning into wine over the grape skins, as opposed to the other method, which we use 25% of. It's big open top bins where we actually do, we get up on top of the bins and punch down the skins twice a day. For this, we're fermenting it in a tank where we're actually pumping the juice over the skins. It's a different process, and it does bring out different characteristics in the wine. It's in a tank, so it actually does have cooling jackets, so we can regulate the temperature of the fermentation. Where on those big bins, they ferment at whatever temperature the room and the fermentation allows for, which can be rather warm in the 80s. On these tanks, you can slow down the fermentation. So what you end up doing is sort of, I think, helping retain a little bit of the sort of fresh fruit characters that might get blown off in a very warm fermentation. We're also using the wild or indigenous yeast. So we might have a starter culture, but we're basically using yeast that are on the grapes themselves. We're not adding any commercial yeast. So that adds a different flavor and texture profile. I think we talked about that often on a lot of these virtuals. It does add something different. It adds a little bit more mouthfeel. It's not always as aromatically outgoing as the cultured yeast, but it adds a lot of texture and a lot of body to the wine. And so a lot of times what we'll do is do a combination of a wild and sort of cultured yeast. We've seen that in some of our other barreled wines. This one, 25% of it was in the open top, which usually is done with a cultured yeast because we have less control of the headspace or the air around it. We want the fermentation starting right away. In 19 and 20, these fermentations in the tanks, the wild fermentation started so quickly, we didn't really have to worry. If they don't start pretty quickly, sort of off flavors can happen. If these wild yeast start too slow, other things can start in there, and they can put on some off flavors and aromas. So we like to be very careful on how is getting this fermentation started. So usually we'll mitigate the headspace or the air around those. In a tank, you can do this where you actually pump in CO2, and that helps keep any oxygen off the grapes, which helps keep some of the oxygen, other sort of off bacteria and things that might start bad fermentations. So this is actually one of we really like what this has been doing, and we're going to continue with this type of fermentation, especially on the Cab Franc. It may be something we also do with the Pinot Noir in the future, but right now we only have a few of these tanks, and so we've primarily used them with Cab Franc, and I think to good success, retaining that really sort of fresh fruit, bright style that I think we've been known for in our Cab Francs. We do barrel age these, and this was 9 months in neutral French. So all of our barrels, as I've talked about before, is they're all very old barrels. I mean, at most we get 3-year-old barrels to start. And we're gonna actually have a bunch of those this year, some at least new to us in the cellar. But most of the time it's anywhere from 3 years to 20-year-old barrels. The idea is it's aging them, softening them in the wood, giving that micro-oxidation, since wood breathes slightly, to help soften the wine and concentrate the wine. But it's not putting all that heavy oak flavoring in, which I find with especially a wine like this that would just unbalance it and make it taste like an oak chip. We're trying, especially in the Cab Franc, in this style, to keep it as so true to the varietal and that sort of freshness, and not try to cover it up with a bunch of oak. A lot of times that'll just, you just don't taste the wine anymore. You just taste, oak sometimes I think we think of wines in a certain way. Oak provides things like coconuts and coconut flavors and other flavors that you think might be a part of the wine. It's actually a lot from the barrel. And so I think we want to try to highlight the flavors of the varietal as much as possible and sort of use those slight oak flavors to enhance it as opposed to cover it. So.
And George, I think my comment about the color or the body is in the glass. It looks lighter like a Pinot Noir would as opposed to a dark, rich color that I kind of expect from previous Atwater Cab Francs.
Yeah, I think the Cab Franc probably though, I think that's might be part of the fermentation that we've been doing in the past couple of years. I think you don't get as much heavy extraction, I think, as when you're doing the punch downs. Although it's been it is very vintage. You know, how much extraction color we get is sort of really a lot of vintage. I've noticed over the years, you know, if we've done these verticals, and I think you can see it really in those, how different every vintage is in color. You know, I think we've talked about this quite often. I know, with Wes too, is, you know, how important is color, and worrying about dark, you know, it's not dark enough. It's this, that. And you know, you talk about that with rosés too. Oh, it's not dark enough, or it's not light enough.
You don't taste color, you taste taste.
That's right. And I think sometimes there's this feeling that it has to be a certain color, or else there's going to be something terribly wrong. We've sort of stopped worrying about color on these. Just be that, because I think you can go too far with trying to get too much color at the expense of the wine itself. You know, you can do these longer, like leaving them on skins for much longer. You can do all kinds of things to try to you know, add more color. You can add additives. There's all kinds of things you can do. But we're trying to stay as true as we can to the vintage and the wine. We try not to add any additives other than just the standard, you know, sulfurs and things like that.
I just assumed there was something slightly different about either how you fermented or how you aged, or something about the process that did that as opposed as compared to prior vintages.
Yeah, I guess if vintages prior to 17 would have been all in the sort of open top bin. So it could be that there was more extraction on those. It could be, like I said, vintage or how the color, you know, color can sort of fix itself during the fermentations, and some things can help fix it, and other things can help sort of lighten it. So it could have been this. There's a couple different things for different vintages. Like I said, 18. You know, you put this next to the 18, you'll see a much lighter color in the 18, and I think that was a very vintage related.
I've started my own library of Cab Francs. I have 15 through 19 now, one bottle of each, at least one.
Wow.
They're fun. It's fun to have those. Yeah, we did one not that long ago. I think we did a virtual vertical.
Well, you did the Riesling.
We did a Cab Franc. I think we did a Cab Franc in the tasting room before COVID, where we had I don't know, we had 13, 14, 15, or 16 or something like that. And it was actually quite interesting to taste them all together. So we actually have some from 17, 16, 17, and 18 and 19 now. And so that might be a fun one that we put together a vertical and offer that. I haven't done many of the verticals during the summer because, once again, no one wants to do a virtual during the summer. It seems like everyone was tired of doing virtuals for a while after COVID and everything else. Yeah, no one wants, after 2020, everyone wants to get out into the world more, and so nobody wanted to sit in front of the computer. So once winter comes again, we're gonna pop up some more of those verticals, so you guys can keep a lookout for those too. We'll bring those back. I don't know, Wes, do you have any comments on color or?
Yeah, I mean, The color is kind of reflective of, I mean, so during a fermentation, I'll try not to get too nerdy and technical about it. I mean, color is determined by a few things. The vintage is one. A cooler year, you're going to have less color. Anthocyanins is the compound that contributes to color, and usually you see more of those in warmer years. If you compare this to the 2020, you will notice that the 2020 is much darker, even though it was made in the same way. Most of it was tank with some bin fermented. Pretty much the same thing as the 19. But I guess color comes out, once you get the grapes into the tank, into the cellar. If you want to manipulate color, in a natural way, not adding anything to it, you would do something called a cold soak, which we don't currently do. We don't really have access to a refrigerated room. We could do it on our Cab Franc. We may do it this year on our Cab Franc if I can convince Vinny to do so. And that will get you a little more color and aroma. But the benefit of the tank is, although it's a gentler process, and yes, you have control of the temperature, for things like cold soaking, you usually wouldn't run a red wine at, say, 60 degrees, where, unlike a white wine, which you usually would have around 60 degrees. So what I'm getting at is the tank fermentations are usually hotter. I remember last year and even in 2019, those tanks can get up to 90 degrees. That's hot.
Yeah.
And so when you have a fermentation that is that hot, which is hotter than the bin fermentation, which are still probably around high 70s or 80s, it extracts more tannin. So they may have a less color to them, but they should feel a little more extracted, not overly extracted, but a little more extracted. And that's usually what you'll get from the tank fermentations. And I think that's why we've been doing them on top of the spontaneous fermentation, which also can add to the body and texture, aka a little more tannin. So you may see less color, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a lighter style.
Yeah, Wes, doesn't the process of fermentation generate heat?
Yes, it does. That is why we cool our white tanks. Usually, white wines like to be fermented. In the modern era of winemaking, we have the luxury of temperature control. You'll get more fruitiness out of cooler wine, cooler fermentations, usually around 60 degrees, give or take a few degrees. Whereas reds, although we have a fruitier style, our Cab Franc is kind of on the lighter, fruitier style, you still want a warmer fermentation to extract those tannins. Because if you left it at 60 degrees or a cooler temperature like that, you wouldn't have as much extraction, and then the wine would be light, much lighter, to the point of where it may not even be really recognizable as a red wine, or you might think it's kind of flimsy or too light for
like
a red wine.
Probably like a rosé.
Almost, yeah. It'll probably have the texture of the rose. It'll have so much less tannin that it'll be weird. Like it'll look like a red wine because it'll have that color, but it won't have the tannin because you fermented it really cool at a really cool temperature. So yes.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so
Right.
much you can do with winemaking, in manipulating sort of things just by changing temperatures, by putting them in different vessels, by putting in wood or tanks or cement or anything. So you can do a lot of different things. I guess it just really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. It'd be fun to try other methods. We're pretty small, so we always talk about getting all kinds of things. Ceramic tanks or larger barrels or all these different things that you can do. And you really have to have a plan for that. What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you doing this? Is it just because you want to try it out? Or is it, you're hoping to bring something to the wine? We want to make this, it was sort of like when we decided with Gewürztraminer. We had always done it in stainless steel. and we were never as winemakers really like that style as much. It was a dry Gewürztraminer, which we liked making, had a little astringency on the finish, and we didn't really want to make a semi or off dry Gewürztraminer. So what we did was instead of doing it in stainless, we went to fermenting it in barrels, and we did some partial fermentations on that, and then we started just doing it all the time. We really liked what happened with that. So just by changing sort of where you're fermenting it and how you do it, from that sort of very temperature regulated tank to now a barrel, warmer fermentation barrel that's has a different dynamic shape, size, everything. It's going to change how the wine, and we liked how that much better and how that changed the wine. So yeah, we can do simple things with what we have and really make significant changes to the style of the wine. But there was a reason why we did that. We were hoping to achieve a certain something, change how it finished. We had experimented slightly, and then that's why we changed it. Once again, you can always have your standard thing, and you always have like an experimental thing. We do that a lot too. The orange wines were, if I had done those many years, we had experimented on how best to do that as a standalone style. And I think we've sort of figured out what we like best and how that we make that style. So yeah, it's just it just really, why are you doing this and what are you trying to achieve? Is it going to make a better wine? Is it going to make a different enough wine that you want to continue doing it too? And we don't particularly age these wines long term in oak, mostly because I think we are trying to keep this fresh, vibrant style. And long and leave in wood, it's going to change it quite substantially too. I think the only ones we've really done long aging on is the orange wines, because they are better wines for longer aging in barrels, and Cab Sav, because Cab Sav has a lot more tannins and really can hold up to a little bit more barrel aging. And I think we really like how that works with the Cab Sav. I don't, and anyone else feels, I don't really like it as much in Cab Franc, because I think our style of Cab Franc is it's this sort of fresher style. And I think leaving it longer, it changes it in a different way. And there's plenty of wines, like I said, we can make Cab Franc that longer term aging wine, because I think it shows better. It shows well in that style, where I think Cab Franc is really, at least from Finger Lakes, I really like this sort of fresher style. That's me, and I know Vinny likes it too, but that's sort of you talk about the house styles and how things work. That's sort of been our house style.
So George, you said the magic word. I got to get my order for Gewürztraminer in again.
We're going to be making one this year. So we've been out of Gewürztraminer. Actually, that barrel fermented change really made it more popular. I
get in one more plug for reverts.
Yes, we do have. I actually do have some reverts. We kept some in the wings. We actually have. I don't have a lot. I have a few cases, a couple of the vintages. So we're gonna bring that out, because I know there's a bunch of reverts heads. If you guys weren't in the club or haven't been in the tasting room, we did have those for the club pickups. I don't know if anybody tried the 2011 reverts that was down there. Did you guys get a hold of that one? Did you guys come pick up, or did you have it shipped?
No, we're 4 hours away. You shipped.
No, but we.
Well, actually, we picked up the last one. Remember, we stopped there at the end of July and we got it early.
Oh, that's right. So
yeah,
I do have.
So we missed the tasting weekend because we came on like the 31st of July.
All right. Well, I'll try to. We'll talk about putting it up for the next wine club or something, or putting it at least on the wine club page, because I do have a couple. We had like a case and a half of these 2011 reverts, which was actually really delicious. It was like 77% Gewürz, 30, something like that. 70%, 30% Riesling. So it was really good.
For just a couple of hours.
I know. See, you should have taken the 4-hour drive. But I don't think we'll be making a reverts this year, but I know there are the reverts heads out there, so we'll have at least a couple of the old vintages available for you guys, at least to revisit in the small amounts we have.
George,
Yeah.
okay, just asking because we're a lot further away.
Yeah, we're 8+ hours away, so,
Yeah, I'll see about putting some of it on the website for you guys that weren't able to get here, because I think everybody that's been here already has sort of gotten their fill of getting those. So if you guys want to try them, I think that the 11 was spectacular, and it held up really well. And it's a little more Gewürzy than the standard reverts. For some reason, that 11 was, I don't know why they must have had more, must have decided more Gewürz was better on that vintage, because usually it's like 50-50. But for some reason, the 11 was primarily, like I said, 70% Gewürz. But I do have a couple other vintages. I saved some cases of, maybe like I said, 5 or 6 cases. And I'll next time I get those in from the warehouse, I'll put them up online.
Thank you, George. And
Sure.
George, just so personally, like we've been through the Finger Lakes a bunch of different times. I have to say, like for most vineyards, Gewürztraminer is not on my list. But as far as Atwater is concerned, I like the Gewürz that's put out by Atwater.
Oh, good. Well, like I said, we've sort of been messing around with it for some years now and trying to figure out the best way to do it. I think going forward, it will be that style. I know we've already planned for this year, and the plan is we're going to make primarily skin fermented and then barrel aged. So it'll be a blend of skin fermented, aged, barrel aged, and non-skin fermented barrel aged. And that was basically what the 16 was. So, and the 14 was barrel fermented, just standard Gewürz barrel fermented. So it'll be in that same sort of style. And I think that's where we're basically going to go forward with that wine for the majority of the Gewürz we make. The other Gewürz, of course, goes to our standard orange wines and things like that. So we're definitely going to keep more of those. And you'll also see some new orange wines. We just bottled a Pinot Gris orange wine. Pinot Gris is also another one we've been working on for the skin fermented whites, as well as a couple others. We'll see how that goes, but we'll have actually several different orange wines coming up again, if you guys like that style.
those have been fun.
Yeah, I really like.
They're really.
Those are really good.
Yeah.
Something different.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about having people try that they may not have tried them before. So those have been great, and we're really into them. We're trying to, of course, figure out how to make the best orange wine. We've been tasting them from around the world. I just ordered a whole other batch of them today. Every Friday we have Orange Wine Friday, and we taste them from around the world to try to hone our style. I think ours is pretty darn good in comparison.
Yes.
So,
yes, they are.
Yeah, keep an eye on those if you like something new. We always like having new things. Wes is also going to be working on some new pet nats this year.
I am.
So I'm busy in the doing things in the business end now. So Wes is going to be taking on a lot of things with the sort of experimental stuff.
Yes, you'll see you'll see a few things from this year that will be perhaps new to the Atwater lineup. Pet nats, maybe something else. We'll see.
Wes is giving us a
Yes.
teaser.
Maybe a red wine project. We'll see. We will see.
Yeah, we got to have something interesting for y'all. I think, and if you haven't had the new cuvee, that is really delicious.
Really
It's been
good.
going fast. That one's Chardonnay and Riesling. So we'll have some sparkling. I think we already have to disgorge some more because everyone has bought lots of it. So, and then the pet nats are almost out for the 2020s. We ran out of the 2020 Riesling pet nat, and now we're almost 3/4 done with the red pet nats. So if you like those pet nats, we're almost done with those. And actually, the last 2 cases of rosé are in the tasting room. So the last rosé, the Pinot Noir rosé, is actually pretty much gone. So rosé season is ending. Sorry to see it go.
I may have to hoard what I have in my cellar then.
Okay,
later.
yeah,
For
You might
Indian
wanna-
summer.
that's right. You might want that, or if you're around, get the last of the bottles. Yeah, it's sad to watch all these guys go. It seems like they went so quickly. But like I said, I guess it's getting towards winter, so rosé season is coming to an end.
Those were actually both good, the La Franquish and the Pinot.
Yeah, the 2020 ones were really delicious. They were and we were looking at today how dark they were. And we didn't even leave them on the skins. It was basically, they just 2020 was so rich a year that everything was dark. This year we'll be probably making some more Pinot. We may have Pinot Blau. I'm not sure what we have for grapes. It might be another blend involved too, whether that's with Cab Franc or we're gonna see how much we get off the vines. But our new plantings of Zweigelt and Lagrein are coming in. This is their first sort of small year. If the birds haven't gotten them because we haven't really netted them yet, we're going to try to make maybe a blend of rosé for that. We're just not sure yet on how the vintage goes. But we're going to have those coming up next year. We'll have probably at least a good crop of Zweigelt and Lagrein, 2 of the new reds that we planted over 3 years ago now. So there'll be that too for you guys. I think the other thing coming up is probably for the next wine club shipments. It looks like they're all going to be reds because we pretty much have gone through most of the whites. So what you guys will be seeing is probably mostly reds, which is be good because we actually got a new full Cab Sauv. I think we have an 18 Cab Sauv, which we had 100 cases of. We have a 19 Cab Sauv. We have that Blau Frankish Cab Franc blend.
Yep.
And I think we talked about that 19
Syrah.
Patra size Riesling.
Yeah.
And then we have a 19 Syrah, which is actually going to be coming out sooner than later because we're almost out of the Syrah. If you like the Syrah 17, we're on the last, 16 cases. So that's another one. So any of you guys are looking stuff that you like a lot, we're almost out of a couple of things on the red side. 17 looks like it's wrapping up. So the next vintages will be the 19s. And there's still, I think the 18 Cab Sauv is the last of the 18s too. So any other questions on any other wines you have or any other questions before we head out?
Always fun, George and Wes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so much. Yeah, like I said, go ahead.
I didn't hear anything about Pinot Gris.
The Pinot Gris. Yeah, I mean, the Pinot Gris is going to be made, all of it will be made into wine. So as soon as it is ready to go, we'll be making it. All of our grapes will be going to wine this year. This will be
It's all on your blocks now. It's not Sawmill Creek anymore, right?
No, we haven't had Sawmill Creek since, gosh, when was the last time? Sawmill Creek was 13. I think when I started here, we had the last. It was that long ago, yeah. Yeah, I think we were getting it from Sawmill Creek, and then there was when we were transitioning to ours, we were actually getting it from. There's a place in Skinny Atlas that had Pinot Gris. Oh, I forget the name of the vineyard.
Some of it North Block too, like North Block 6 or something.
No, it's all south. It's all south farm.
There was one that was from this other vineyard, and I think what ended up happening after we got that year, they actually had a terrible cold snap up there because it's not the best up there, and it wiped out a lot of their Pinot Gris. I can't remember the name of the vineyard, but since then, since basically 13, 14, it's been just Atwaters. And we don't have a lot. We have about an acre of it. That's another one we were talking about whether we planted more of that or not. It's been very popular. We went, surprisingly, have gone through it. And I think the style will be this year similar to what we did in 18, which would be that sort of extended lees contact and maybe a little bit of barrel aging on it. So yeah, it'll be similar to the 18 in style, which I think was amazing, and that's why we sold through it really fast, even as much as we made of it. So yes, Pinot Gris is coming back in both standard form and orange wine
And
form.
skin, yes.
So I know it was really sad when we ran out. That's another thing to look forward to. See, just another great thing to look forward to in the spring. Hopefully by beginning of summer, we'll have some Pinot Gris. Any other questions? There were some things on chat. Did we answer any?
No, there was nothing on. There was just a
Okay,
thank
there's
you.
some
and-
thank yous. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Well, we'll say thank you as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, there's a
Thank you.
picture. I don't know if you guys have met, but you haven't seen. One to the, I guess, right of me when you're looking at the picture is Matt Russo. He's my business partner, and you'll see him a lot in Finger Lakes. He usually comes up once a month. He's out of Connecticut, and he's a really great guy. You'll really like him. It's been a pleasure having him help me with this project too. So yeah, say hi if you see him in the tasting room. He'll definitely be around. He's got his own business, so other business. So he is definitely. This is not winery is not his full-time job. Where I'm the managing partner, so this is my full-time job. He has
3 wine glasses and 1 plastic bottle.
I know. Well, he's young. That's a friend of his with his son. So he was only like 16 or 17. So yeah, I would probably get in trouble if he had a wine glass.
No
too.
underage drinking at that.
Yes, we're showing that. And then of course, this was from a couple of years back.
This
I
is
always
from
like
19. Yeah.
always like showing this picture. Here's 19. So from that vintage, all of us that was the Gewürz sparkling.
Gewürz bubbles, yes.
Yeah, in the vineyard. So we'll have another one of these. And then you guys will also see some of our new interns. We have 2 new interns, Catherine and Shannon. They're very excited to be helping out, and it's great to have them too. And I think Amy will be putting something about that in the next newsletter, and you get to meet them too. They're going to be a great addition to this harvest to help out, to keep me from having to clean any tanks. We now have some more folks to help
I have
clean.
1 Gewürz bottle left.
Oh,
yeah,
poured
I'm
it.
saving it.
I don't even think I think we only have basically a
We have
couple bottles left.
Yeah, we have
We
very
don't even
few.
have any. For some reason, I think it was so popular. I think I didn't even get to keep too many. Usually I try to keep some cases of that stuff, but that one everybody wanted it. So I felt guilty. So I think I just kept pairing it out. Now it's gone.
Well, I'm sure we downed your supply by a little bit, but I got
Yeah.
1 bottle left.
Save it for a good occasion. It's going to be great. Thank you
I feel like I
guys
need
so
to
much.
inventory my cellar better.
You better, yeah, or start looking at the what you have left before we run out of the last of these other couple. Especially this 19 or the 20 dry Riesling. I'm definitely keeping a case of that for myself because that was probably, like I said, one of my favorite dry Rieslings. So, thank you guys so much. I'm sure we'll see you around the next virtual. It seems like we got a good core list of people that come to all these, and also in the taste room. Looks forward to seeing you all there. And like I said, we're going to try to do some more events coming up in the next year, but this year and 20 just sort of killed most of those aspirations of wine club events. So the pickup part, or at least the pickup weeks, will continue for the next pickup. And these virtuals will continue. And if there's anything else you guys think we should do, please let me know. Other than that, thank you guys. Any questions anybody has, please always email or call me or Wes, and we can answer whatever questions you have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, George. It's a 2013, by the way. When I got,
There you go.
It is 13.
There you go.
2013 Gewürztraminer Method Champenois.
Well, have a good time.